Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this latest instalment of Why Paint Anything Other Than Orcs, it's time for the orkiest of orcs, the properest lads there are, the Goffs. I love the no-nonsense attitude of these guys. I love that simplistic, black, white, little bit of red, that's your lot. I love how with that you can create such a limited palette and get such an impactful looking army on the table. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I would go about painting my own Goff Scarboys mob. Now let's paint. So like all the other videos in this series, I'm going to be starting off with the skin, and like all the other orcs in this series, I'm starting off from a simple grey prime. So I've used AK Filler Primer here, just a quick dusting of that over the model. You can see this is one of those alternate introductory set orc ones, so it's in the green plastic. It's all it needs, it's plenty for the paint to key to, and it gives me a nice bright base to work from. Now I'd like to try and do different greens for most of these orcs because it's fun. This is all about just trying out ideas, right? So I dipped into my box of P3 paints and grabbed out 3 that I thought would work pretty well together. This one, I wanted that slightly darker, dingier, more brown greens. The others, I've tended to go more into the blues and stuff for the shadows. This one, I wanted to keep it a little bit more natural, a little bit more neutral as well. I guess as natural as a sentient murderous fungus can be. But that's what I wanted to go for with this one. And I have thinned the paint down roughly 50-50 with water on my wet palette. And I'm just giving a couple of coats to get by no means a completely solid base coat on the model, but a decent place to start from. And I like the fact that it's a little bit blotchy. There's a little bit of variance already within the green on there. So I'm not going for that super sort of consistent, but I am going for smooth. So I'm trying to avoid the paint building up in any areas. So I'm keeping my brush moving and not applying too much in one area. So once I've got a few coats of that on there, it was time to go in with the shade. So here I've taken the darkest green and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of Lahmian medium and a little bit of water to create my own wash with. The reason I've added the medium in there, and you could use anything, you could use contrast medium, you could just go down the art shop and get a big bottle of matte medium, matte acrylic medium, do exactly the same thing. It's to help the pigment that's in the paint kind of stick together, even though we're going to dilute it more than it really wants to be diluted. If we just use pure water to do this, you would find the pigments would split up and they'd sort of whizzle over the place and wouldn't stick together. Whereas with adding that little bit of extra thinner in there, or medium rather, in there, you can see that as we're doing it and we pull our brushes at the end of each stroke into the recesses, that most of that pigment is ending up in those recesses and is ending up there together, which is exactly what we want. And on the whole, it means we'll avoid things like tide marks and stuff. You'll still get the odd one, of course you will, but it's no stress, right? You're going to be painting like 1,000 orcs, so no point worrying about one little tide mark. And I gave that 2 coats of the wash, but the second time round, I just focused on the recesses themselves. And then it was time to start building back up the sort of mid-tone and the highlight. So I took the mid-tone paint and I slowly started adding a little bit more of that highlight, that very yellowy green into there. As you can see here, I'm using a really big brush and I'm using very dilute paint. Again, this is probably diluted, I don't know, 50-50 with water, something like that. And I've probably got a little bit too much on the brush here because you can see I'm getting these odd little pools of the paint. But I was being impatient and I just kept on going and I knew it'd be all right in the end. With regards to where I'm putting the highlights on here, I'm picturing as if this orc is more or less lit straight from above. So all the faces, all the parts of the muscles that are facing upwards are going to be lighter than the parts that are facing away from straight upwards, obviously. So right underneath, I'm going to leave it completely dark. And then right on the top, I'm going to focus the most concentrated part of the highlight. Sometimes this means that you will get recesses in the muscles that actually are completely perpendicular to the light, so therefore they will be highlighted. So it's just a slightly different way of painting where all your recesses are dark and all your sort of furthest edges, most extreme edges, are light. But I don't think it's particularly complicated. And once you've done a couple of lads, it'll make sense. Generally, when I do it, I think of it from above, but then also start looking at the individual muscles, which on these brilliant new orc sculpts are very easy to see what they are. I kind of think, right, where's the highest point on this particular muscle? And I work my highlights towards that, and generally it's going to work out okay. The reason I'm using the big brush is because as I load it up with the paint, I can do one entire pass of the model without needing to go back to the palette. It's just a little bit more efficient, means you're staying kind of, or I'm staying kind of in the zone with it, and just enjoying the painting. And as I say, this is how I would approach painting an army of these guys. So there does need to be an element of efficiency in there if we're to get the army done. And here you can see the difference. So just a few of those highlights versus just the straight wash over the guy on the left. And what I thoroughly enjoy about this process, and I've talked about it in the previous videos, is the fact that every single layer that we're building up, or each time I'm hitting it with a brush, none of them are that important. So if I get something wrong, 99% of the time, it just doesn't matter. And it makes it a nice, relaxing way to paint. We're not worrying about things. It's, you know, in my head, that's what I want from my painting. That's particularly what I want from my army painting, right? I kind of don't want to be doing too much thinking. How embarrassing. I haven't put my phone on silent. Well, that's Andy sending through a photo of his current Patreon project. Gosh, that's good timing, isn't it? I think it's the Patreon thing that's just popped up on there. Well, thank you ever so much to all of you that support us over on Patreon. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So if, in addition to the free YouTube videos you get and the free Twitch streams we do, you can get additional tutorials every single month by Andy. They're often a lot more in depth, focusing on sort of display level projects, multi-parters. I'll do stuff over there. Ben's doing stuff over there now. And there's lots of stuff planned, you know, just to make sure we give back to you guys that support us. And without you, as I said, we couldn't do any of this. So thank you ever so much. And if for any reason you can't support us on Patreon, then a like, a comment, a subscription here on YouTube, it makes a huge, huge difference. So thanks to you guys as well. So once we'd finished off the highlight, and in that last one there, it was just working up to that final green. Oh, by the way, it's an amazing Eldar Exodite that he's working on at the moment, Andy. And there's a Chaos Dragon in the back of the photo, which I know what it's for, but I don't know if he's talked about it yet. I think he did in yesterday's video, but I haven't watched that yet, so I need to pop over and see that. But anyway, yeah, lots of awesome Warhammer goodness. In the previous videos, I've done a stage where I use a sort of a flesh-coloured wash in the shadows through the airbrush. And I've been trying to, I never like having a crux, I never like having a paint that I absolutely rely on for everything. And I'd started to get that way with AK Quick Gen Reddish Flesh. So last video I used a different one, and in this video I was looking around my sort of washes and contrast paints and things like that, and I thought, oh, Targor Rageshade's a rather lovely colour and an incredible name. Why don't we give that a go? And the reason I liked the idea with this is the obvious sort of purple that's in there, but it's sort of purple and red, or reddy purple, I guess, which is really, really nice. We know will work well against the yellow that's on the skin. We know that from the colour wheel. You can see here on Test Orc, I used the reddish flesh on his arm, so you can see the difference putting that reddish flesh as the shadow colour versus the Targor on the left there. I guess it's all fun. This is all ideas. It's all going in the recipe book for future Orc projects to be refined if I wish to, or just continue using if I want to, say, do a Gorkamorka mob or a Mordheim warband or things like that. But the nice thing here is we're coming up with tons and tons of different recipes we can tweak, and we can pull the things we like from all of them. And actually, I was wondering, and I'll tell you what, I'll talk about that at the end of the video. I was pretty happy with the skin there. I thought, don't want to spend any more time on it. Let's move on with the rest of the model. So now I was just blacking out the areas on the model that I knew were going to be black or were going to be metal, just to give me an idea of what I was going to be working with. And time to paint his trousers. So as ever, I like to use artwork where possible to inspire me and influence me. And in the Imperial Armour book, Raid on Castoral Novum, there's a few amazing colour plates, and you'll have seen a load of the Death Skull ones when I did that video, and here's some of the Goff ones. And I really liked that kind of grey, green, brown colour they were using on the clothing. And I thought, right, let's have a go with that. So I grabbed, I was in the P3 box, so I just kept using the P3 paints. I'm trying to explain to you why I'm using the colours I'm using, and therefore if you don't have these paints, either you can go and get them, or equally you've probably got something similar in your collection you can have a go with. But I decided to use Bastion Grey for this, and I mixed in a little bit of black for the base coat, and then was just using pure Bastion Grey. This time I was trying to be a little bit more consistent with the direction of my brushstrokes, sort of trying to keep them all in more or less the same direction. But it was a very similar process to how we highlighted the flesh. It was thinking about what areas are facing upwards, what are facing away. So I worked through the Bastion Grey, added a tiny dot of off-white into it. I think, pretty sure it was ivory. I used ivory later on for a final highlight. And then I went back in with the darkest colour, thinned down further until it was kind of see-through. So I made sure there wasn't too much on my brush And then I just went in and redefined a few of those shadows that maybe I lost by being a little bit careless with the highlight stages. Again, just a fun, relaxing way to paint, a different way to paint to how I perhaps have painted over the last few years. So I'm having a ton of fun with it. I think it'll be time soon to do a pretty serious project where I just put into practice what I've been playing around with for the last month or two and see what happens if we push it a little bit further. I've got a model in mind for October that I'd like to try that on, so fingers crossed we'll get to that. Now, for his shirt, which I don't tend to do much sort of online hobby stuff. I tend to sort of talk to my mates about hobby and that's it. I don't sort of go on forums and things like that. But I was on the Reddit Ork subreddit the other day, and it appears there's quite a lot of consternation around the Ork sort of shirt, tank top things. Like, what are they? Are they dungarees? They don't sort of quite go. I understand what people are saying. They're quite difficult to understand how exactly they work. I've just tried not to let that bother me. I think they're cool, and I wanted to paint my Goffs as that sort of old school British punk kind of vibe. So I wanted, white vests on them. I wanted the sort of grey trousers. I was tempted to do pinstripe, actually. I wish I'd done a black pinstripe on one of them. And I want to do things like red braces and that sort of stuff, just to really lean into that old British punk look. So I just went for a kind of dirty white tank top on him, which I thought looked kind of cool. Then it was time for the leather. For most of the leather, I'm going to stick to the one I've been using on all the other Orks because I absolutely love it. I'm sure you guys will get bored of it if you watch every video, but thank you. But equally, you know what it's like when you find a set of paints that just, if I want a warm, ready, chocolatey brown leather, this is the three paints I'm always going to be going to now. So this is Minicolour, Chocolate, Mahogany and Russet. You could absolutely do this with some other paints, but say the colours, you can see them there on the screen. So that kind of chocolatey brown, that reddier brown as the mid-tone, and then that orangey brown, something like Mornfang or something would work well for the highlight. And you can see I'm applying them again, really dilute, really thinned down. And that's because I wanted the black to show through underneath and I want the previous layers to show through. So we start creating all these different tones on the model. You can see it on the skin there. And hopefully you can see it on the leather and stuff. Now you notice I was putting it over white there on his braces, and that's because I'm going to do them red. But I thought for the pre-shade, well, I might as well do this set of colours for the pre-shade because I know it works well, and then glaze a red over the top. So here I'm going in with that reddier mid-tone, and once that was done, we go in with the orangey brown highlight. And here I'm focusing on the edges, and then loads of just little dashes. It suggests sort of wear and tear, but again, it's taking us certainly less than a minute per model, but it's telling the story. And I went one little step further on the braces because again we were going to be glazing a red over the top of them. Just mixed a bit of that ivory into, I don't know what it was, whatever was on the palette, just gave me an off-white and did a load more scratches and edge highlights on these so that will punch through when we go over it. Because I'd taken my box of washes and stuff out, I had this Berserker blood shade, which I thought in the pot, this is perfect. It's kind of that ox blood look, which, I've had a beautiful pair of Oxblood Doc Martens for years and years, and I thought that would fit really well with these guys as well, that kind of look. And actually, when it went on wet, I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like, this is absolute perfection. But when it dried, sadly, it wasn't quite there. But I'm definitely going to be adding this to the future Minicolour colours, I think. One of my sort of votes. I want that kind of oxblood red. So yeah, it didn't look quite right. So I just grabbed a Flesh Tearer's red contrast. The first time I've put it on here, I've not diluted it, which was a mistake. But I just popped my brush back in the water and thinned it out once I'd realised that. So it was a slightly dilute layer of it, which allowed the stuff to show through underneath. If you go too heavy with the contrasts, I find they kind of obliterate what's underneath. And because we'd already had that layer of wash over it, it had dulled that slightly. So I did need to go back in and just redefine a few of the edges just to get a little bit of that interest back in it. Now with the Goffs, I've said it's simple, but that doesn't mean we should be lazy with it. It's time to address the armour. So I painted it black. But I didn't want to leave it there. When I did that sort of, I don't really know what the video, I think I called it Painting and Collecting Orks, where I was just sort of throwing some ideas at some of the knob models and getting a feel for it. I just did straight black and then an oil wash, and it wasn't enough. It wasn't deliberately lazy, but it wasn't interesting enough compared to the rest of the model, in my opinion. And since then, I'd started to accidentally discover this look where I did a patchy black base coat. So something like Abaddon Black. This is Minicolour Tar, which is like a, like satin black. Basically, what you don't want a matte black paint. You want a more satin black for this. I applied it nice and sort of thinly and splotchily, and a good word. And then I washed over that Jasper, which you can see here is a very, very red brown. Thinned this one down with water. I didn't use any medium or anything. This one you absolutely could have, but there was really no need to. I almost wanted it to break up and do some of those things we spoke about earlier. And this just starts to mix with the white or grey undercoat that's on the black. Then the black, blotchy black going over the top of it, and then this blotchy orangey red going over the top of that. I find just started to give the sense of, the boring black panels just a little bit of life, a little bit of lived-in-ness, which I felt sat much more harmoniously next to things like the skin and the leather where we'd worked texture into them, and the texture and stuff we'd created was as important, as the colours to the final vibe. And that is the whole point when I say, you hear me talk about it all the time with these models. It's me trying to achieve an atmosphere and feeling with these models that explains how I picture them in my head. That could be a multitude of different techniques, as long as the feeling at the end of it is the one I'm trying to evoke on the miniature. So once that was all dry, it was time to do the checks. And you're really lucky with Orks because you don't have to be super neat. So as ever, it's very challenging to paint with white because it dries all the time. So you could use something like a drying retarder, which is exactly what I should have done here, which is really daft because I have one in a box, but I didn't. So thin down the white to where it's coming off the brush without having to press very hard, but also not so thin that you don't really see anything when it's on there. And then it was just a case of placing out a grid. I think it would be a really good challenge to try and do this far more neatly. So let's say on a Dark Angel or something like that, I think it would be good to try and keep your eye in with that sort of thing. But it was fun as well trying to do this messily but with control. So the way I tried to achieve that was to sort of scritchy scratch and stipple in, fill in the squares. And I ended up doing it about 3 or 4 times per square. So I was never trying to achieve full coverage with any one coat. And each time I would go back to the squares, I would try and be just here and there, once or twice on each square, I would try and break across that grid line to just start to try and make it disappear so you don't see the grid, as it were, on there. It just looks a little bit more natural, a little bit like some grots had to daub this on while getting his head kicked in, as is good and proper for the Orc Society. So yeah, just building it up with that density. But again, because of that and because these layers are still slightly see-through, we start to create a little bit more interest in what could be quite boring. Now this took about 6 minutes, to do this axe, which you might think is quite a lot of time. But for me, other than the skin, this axe is the focal point of this particular boy. So I'm quite happy to spend that little bit of time on this. And then I went back in with the black just to tidy up some of it if I'd gone too far and sort of the sizes were a bit too off. And then you see here also did a few scritches and scratches within the white, so to make it look like it was black before they painted the white on. And then one thing I absolutely love, and this is something I first saw Max Verlage, the heavy metal painter, do, which is where he would fade out the checks. And you see it on things like the Skaven, you see it on the Orks, now you see it all over the place with heavy metal stuff. And I absolutely love it. I was like, oh, it's the first chance I've had to do this on a model. Let's do it. Very, very simple. We create a black glaze. So again, we thin down some black paints. It's very, very see-through. We make sure we've got hardly any on our brush so that when we touch it to the model, it's not flooding off and washing everywhere. It's just, we're literally able to sort of smear, for want of a better word, it across the surface, and you can still very clearly see through what is underneath. Left this bit in real time to show you. I think I did three coats in the end. And each time I'm doing it, I'm starting ever so slightly higher up, which means that we go from the white through to the slightly darkened white all the way down into the black. And then I just went back over with the red-brown colour, the Jasper colour there. Again, just to reinforce that. I absolutely love how it looks. And again, I'm excited to, of all the ones so far, this is the scheme I'm most excited to go and try and refine for a character level model. I would still say army painting, but a character level model. And then the new transfer sheet's awesome, so I wanted to use one, and he had a big belly plate, so I just stuck that on there. once that was done, I'll pop a link up to decal video, and I'll make sure I link up to the other Orc videos I've been going on about as well. But once that was all on there and set, I just did a very similar process to the check. So just broke it up again with a little bit of black paint, glazed a little black over it, and then I went in with the red and gave it a glaze of the red as well, just to help tie it in to make it look like it had been painted on there by a grot or whatever. Now we're fast moving towards the sort of details in the end. There's very few models where I think the face isn't a focal point, if not the focal point, certainly one of them, and the Orcs are no different. I have used this colour scheme, or this recipe as it were, here for the teeth and all the others. I really like it. It's just a sort of raw umber colour, an ivory colour, and then in the middle a deliberately sort of yellowy tan colour, because I thought it would be nicer for the tusks on the Orcs to have that little bit of yellow to them. Zandri Dust is that middle colour, which gave us a bit more yellow. And I think it means as well, if we had, say, loads of skulls on here or on the base or whatever, it would give us the option to have some different types of ivory, different types of bone, different types of teeth, things like that, without all having to be exactly the same colour. In fact, I did a video a few years ago on bone and horn. It's still one of the favourite ones I've ever done, so if I remember, I'll link up to that. But yeah, that was the reason behind this. And then it was a simple case, just like I'm talking about, keeping the paint fairly thin, building it up so you can see the previous layer. And with the teeth, I'm always pulling my highlight towards the centre of the mouth. So the bottom teeth, I'm highlighting towards the centre of mouth. Safib, I'm highlighting them towards the centre of mouth on the bottom, but on his top row of teeth, I'm highlighting them towards his gum, not the centre of the mouth, as it were. I just think it's probably completely unnoticeable, but I like why I do it. In my head, it makes sense. And that's why I paint like that. But it's lovely. You can see this, just the whole model starts to come together. We've still got tons of horrible different finishes on here at the moment, particularly glossy here and there and stuff, which is horrible. But now we're starting to fill everything in. We're getting there. Why I thought filming doing the eyes was a good idea, I'll never know. But I must say I'm a lot happier with the footage in this video. I think I'm really getting to grips with the camera now, thanks to Andy for helping me with a couple of settings as well. But the eyes, white first, then red. Red really benefits from white underneath it, helps give it a little bit of punch. And then I didn't film, I went in and did a little orange dot on there as well. I did film it, it looked awful, and I had to take it about 7 times to get it to look right. So there. Now, the sort of final stage of finessing, I guess, with the face, but also a little bit on his knuckles. I've gone back in with the highlight yellow colour, and I'm slowly mixing in a little bit of ivory and just creating a final highlight. So I say just on his knuckles, and then I do his nose, I do his upper lip, and I do his lower lip. I do his lower lip and his nose because I'm going to, in a minute, pink them up. And I do his knuckles and his upper lip because I just like how I just think it makes the skin look really natural by having those sort of nuances within it, that variation within it. And I say, very simple way to draw attention to the model. Now, I've been talking about doing some different coloured lips on some Orcs recently. I think possibly on the Bad Moon last week, I should have done the blue lips. I think that would have worked quite well on that scheme. But this scheme, I absolutely knew from the start it wasn't going to be that. It was going to be the purpley pink lips. So again, we're going to use Magos Purple here to do that. Again, going back to what I mentioned before, like we're using the Targor Rageshade for the shadow. We know that pink and purple works really nice with the greeny, yellowy greens. So we can be very confident using this. And if anything, it means we can be a bit braver using this. Now, I mentioned a second ago all the different finishes on the model. That's because different paints have different properties, and also when you start thinning paints down loads, you start to potentially change some of their properties. But it was grim. It was horrible to look at. So I got a nice matte varnish on here. This is an AK matte varnish. It's doing nothing other than changing the finish on the model. It's not going to do anything to protect your Mini, so just pick it up by the base, not by the model. But it just tied everything together and gave us the finishes we wanted before I moved on to do the metals, which I didn't want to have that super matte finish. In the spirit of adventure and trying out new things, I thought I would try a new metal recipe. So I grabbed Orgoth bronze. I wanted to just try and make like just a rusty old metal, really, in as few stages as possible. Yeah, it didn't work. It's nice, but it's not right. It was too sort of goldy bronze colour. But I'd recently picked up, on the recommendation of my buddy Nick, a few of these Vallejo True Metallic metals. So I picked up this aged metal set, and within that is a wash. And I thought, let's give that, shade they call it. I thought, let's give that a try, see what that looks like. And it's really cool. It kind of reminds me of the old GW gloss washes they did for a few years. So Nuln Oil gloss, Agrax gloss, and I think they did Reichland gloss, maybe Seraphim gloss. But I really liked those. I really liked the way, not only the finish of them, the glossy finish, but I liked the way they behaved by having the gloss in them, which sort of changed their surface tension and stuff and how they would behave on the model. And that's what it reminded me of. Was Nuln Oil gloss basically, but I wasn't convinced on the colour. So I just went back to one of my favourites, which is mixing up Iron Warriors with a dark Vallejo metal colour series silver, any one of the 43 that are basically just a dark silver that look a bit like Iron Warriors. Mix them up, get the properties of both of them, which is a lovely smooth flow of the metallic of the metal colour series one, but the slightly better, more consistent coverage of Iron Warriors. And I loved it, so I just went and slopped it back over that Orgoth bronze one I'd done. You can see wash wasn't even dry on it. I was like, no, this is the right colour for these guys. But I did like the wash, so I went in and applied it. I am looking forward to playing around. I say I bought a couple of these sets. I bought like aged metal and I think copper and maybe a gold set. But you'll know if you've been watching the videos for any length of time, I've sort of been looking around for some new metallics for a while now. I don't think I'm going to luck out and just be able to do one range, but that's often the case. But definitely excited to see what's happening here. So finishing touches time. So once that metal, that wash was dry, I went back in with the Iron Warriors and just did a few little highlights on things like rivets. But then I also went on to some of the black armour and just did a few little tippy-tappy scritches here and there on the edges, just to suggest that sort of wear and tear. And again, make that black armour look deliberate, even though it's quite simplistic. And I've used Iron Warriors for this because, again, it's just, I think it's absolutely brilliant. It's just the right sort of dull silver colour that I was looking for with it. I thought this was particularly effective on this guy's helmet as well. Amazing sculpts. I've said it before, but honestly, the new Orc sculpts are just, they're amazing. I've not loved Orcs as much as this since Brian Nelson turned up at GW and redefined them. And if you'd like to hear more about that, come and check out the Monday evening Twitch stream where we tend to natter quite a lot about Orcs at the moment, me and the chat, because they're awesome. Now, I wanted to use a little bit of oil paints on here because I love using oil paints. And if you're just sort of getting into it and you're interested, these are two colours I would highly recommend picking up, a dark brown and a burnt sienna colour. I'm going to mix them. You see, I pop them on a bit of card there to leach out some of that oil. And then I'm going to mix them with white spirits to create a wash. This is an oil wash. Now, it behaves slightly differently to your normal acrylic wash, but as long as our paint is dry, it's not going to reactivate or react rather with any of the acrylic paint. So as long as everything from the previous, stages is dry, we've nothing to worry about. You don't need to go protecting your miniature with varnish or anything like that. It's absolutely fine. And I've done videos dedicated to oils that talk about why I like them. Again, I'll link up there if I remember to. But I love the finish. I love working with them. And I think there's also an element of, it feels complete for me. You know, if I want to do a paint job for pure enjoyment, although this isn't pure enjoyment, I'm obviously filming it for the channel, the whole thing is really enjoyable. I sort of, there's an element of completeness I find when I use a bit of oils on a model. I'm sure we've all got things like that we like to have on each of our minis that make them perhaps feel finished and like our minis, right? And some element of oil on the miniature for me is, and I guess that's because from when I got back in the hobby that, you know, I've used them ever since. So here you can see me using it primarily as a sort of filter, you know, a sort of very, very thin layer over elements of the model just to tint it, just to change it up a little bit. And then I do the same with the burnt sienna. This is obviously representing sort of a few rusty bits. But you see, I'm not just slapping it all over the model. I'm sort of choosing where I want to put it. And, you know, it took, 20, 30 seconds a mini to do. So it's very, I find it very enjoyable. And I really enjoy the slightly different look that oils can give to the model. And you've got to try and get it over any white bits. The orange, because it just looks great. It's a very, very effective way of just drawing a little bit of attention and coolness, I think, to to the mini. So this guy's shoulder pad, he's got that lovely big sort of bullet hole in there. So I go back to the palette and grab a little bit of the neat oil and just pull a few sort of thick, gloopy, rusty streaks down from there. And then I thought, oh, there's that white transfer, isn't there, on his tummy? Let's do that one as well. And if you'd like to know how I do the bases, that was covered in its entirety in the recent Salamanders Captain video I did. And that's my Goff lads done. Very, very happy with how these guys turned out. I particularly like the skin recipe on these ones. I could see myself using this on some fantasy orc projects. I think it might look really good on hobgrots as well in my head. And it's not a million miles away from how I might approach doing some Lord of the Rings orcs, which I'm looking forward to doing quite soon as well. But yes, again, we're just experimenting with these orc boys. We're finding different things with each one. We're having fun sort of thinking, okay, each one has its own challenges, albeit similar, I think, from clan to clan. But they each have, I think, different elements that you can choose to focus on. So again, if you want to create an army of them where you've got different clans for all the different units, you're going to have a ton of fun. If you want to do a single sort of mono clan army, you're going to absolutely love it, because you're going to dial in on exactly what to you makes Goffs, makes bad moons, that sort of thing. And it's just a lot of fun to paint. I am very, very happy for all you orc collectors out there. I mean, you lot are always happy, but the most recent range of minis, the love they're getting, I think it's wonderful. And I can't wait to see more of them out there. You know, those of you that support us, you know, you have access to the Discord. We've got all the various galleries in there. People are sharing orcs left, right, and centre, and it's absolutely awesome. So there's not many more clans left now in the series. Tell me which has been your favourite so far and which one you'd like me to do next. I might listen, I might not. I'll see how I feel tomorrow morning when we get going. But we've still got the Blood Axes, we've still got the Snake Bites, we've still got the Evil Sons. And then there's the freebooters as well. So who knows? Maybe the series is just going to keep going. Maybe we'll take a break and paint something different. I'm not sure. You tell me. Tell me what you want, and we'll go with that. Now, as ever, if there's anything I've done in the video that you'd like to ask questions about, just pop them down in the comments, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you ever so much for all of your support. Take care, and I'll see you next time. If you like any of the models that you've seen in this video, but you don't have the time or the wherewithal to do them yourselves, then consider giving Ben an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com. Maybe he can help you out.